Hi, my name is Kelsey Griffey and I work for the Bureau of Land Management. Today we're going to learn about the fire triangle and the fire behavior triangle. So we're going to get to light some things on fire. But before we can do that, we need to be safe. So I have a fire extinguisher, I have my spray bottle, and all the ladies need to pull their hair back. And remember, not to do this without adult supervision. To start with, let's learn the basics of the fire triangle. Can you guess what the three components are of the fire triangle? So one side is oxygen. What are some examples of oxygen? Can be air, wind, such. Another side of our triangle is fuel. And some examples of fuel could be, they could be trees, sagebrush, grass, kinds of things out in the wildlands. And then our last side is we need heat. And what's some examples of heat? What are some natural examples? Some natural examples would be lightning, volcanoes. And then some human-caused examples could be from exploding targets, from chains dragging and sparking, from people playing with matches or lighters. So now we have this triangle, but we can break that triangle. How do we get rid of these things? This is basically what we do when we fight fires, is we think about the fire triangle and how we could remove different sides of it. So for the fuel side, that trees, grass, shrubs, what we do is we cut it down, or we could bring in retardant and drop that red mud on all the vegetation, and when it's coated it won't burn. Or we can mow or bring things down to dirt level with dozers and such. And that's what we're doing also on hand crews, is we're digging down to that mineral soil, because fire needs things to eat. And so when it runs out of fuel, the food it eats, like grass and timber, then it'll stop. So we got rid of one side, so now our triangle is broken. Now, how could we get rid of oxygen? And we'll take a look at this. So fire, we'll light the candle. And now we're going to take away its oxygen. So some ways that we can get rid of oxygen are from smothering the fire. That's a technique people use when they put out their campfires, is they bury it in dirt so that it doesn't have any air available to it. And we do that too. We call that dry mopping in fire, when we dig and dig and dig, but that's a lot of work, and that's why we like to add water in. And then the last side we talked about was heat. That spark. And that heat we can remove by spraying water on the fire. So that is your three sides of the fire triangle. Now we're going to talk about the fire behavior triangle. And the fire behavior triangle is made up of fuels, once again. So what did we learn about fuels? That's the timber, grass, sagebrush, that vegetation across the country. But now, instead of looking at it as just something that the fire would consume or eat, we need to look at it as across the landscape. So is it all super close together? Is it tall, short, and such? Because that provides different dynamics to fire behavior. The other side that we need to think about is topography. So is the ground flat? Is it steep? Those things make a big difference on how fire reacts. Then the last side of that triangle is weather. And weather can be pretty critical, as we're always checking on winds, if thunderstorms are coming in, because that can bring erratic and downdrafts of wind that really affect fire behavior. It's just like when you're at a campfire and you start blowing on the fire and it gets bigger and bigger. And that's what wind can do to our fires on the landscape. Don't play with fire. Only adults should be lighting things on fire, and do so safely. Remember, I have my water bottle and fire extinguisher nearby. So to start, I want you guys to make some guesses about what kind of fire behavior you would expect in these situations. So looking at this one, the matches can represent trees or brush, and these trees are all spread out here. What type of fire behavior do you think is going to happen here? So probably not a lot of fire behavior, because it is nicely spaced out, so the trees aren't touching each other, so they aren't as likely to ignite one another. And if we do this flat, do you think that there's much chance that they'll burn into each other? Probably not, but we'll check it out. So we lit one, and it's trying, but it's not going anywhere. So that's basically like lightning struck this tree in this forest, and because it was a healthy forest, it did not ignite the rest of the forest. It burned out on its own. Now looking over here at this forest, the trees are really close together, and we're also on a steeper slope. So if we tried burning this one, we're gonna probably see a lot more dynamic fire behavior here. It's gonna be more intense because they're close together, so they're gonna ignite each other, and they're gonna wanna run uphill. So fire likes to run uphill. Let's burn this one. As you can see, I've put in a fuel break, is what we would call it, or hand line, in the center of this. And as you'll see, because that vegetation was removed, the fire stops. And this is what we're doing when we're fighting fire, is we're creating these fuel breaks, either through hand line, dozer line, we're trying to remove the fuel component there so that the fire can't continue on. So now if you were to see this forest, what would you think? Probably pretty unhealthy. This could be an example of a lodgepole pine forest, just like we have up near Yellowstone. This is very common. This could be a forest that has become overgrown due to too much fire suppression. What are some other ways that we could manage so that this would not happen? So we could log, we could graze, and we could also let fire play its natural role on the landscape, which is pretty important, especially in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem that we live in East Idaho. And Idaho itself is really a fire state, and a lot of our vegetation and species have become fire adapted. So let's see what happens here. And we also have it on a steep grade, so this should be pretty exciting. Thank you for joining me today to learn about the fire triangle and fire behavior triangle. Please check out some of the additional links listed to learn more.